In April 2026, Dubai police officially announced the arrest of an Irish national based on a judicial file transferred from Dublin. For an entire decade, this figure had been identified by American and European authorities as one of the key leaders of a transnational criminal organization. He was accused of running a complex network involving cocaine smuggling, money laundering, and gang violence, with operations stretching from Ireland, the United Kingdom, and Spain all the way to the United Arab Emirates. What made it remarkable was that, for years, he had not been hiding in the shadows. He had been living openly in the luxury of Dubai, a city once seen as a safe fortress for crime bosses trying to stay beyond the reach of the law back home. He appeared at major boxing events, owned luxury apartments, and publicly available photos showed him alongside professional fighters. As one of Europe's most heavily pursued men, he was the subject of a reward of up to $5 million from the U.S. Department of State for information leading to his arrest or conviction. He was also financially sanctioned by U.S. authorities, and investigators linked him to a criminal network said to be worth up to £1.5 billion. And yet, for nearly a decade, he remained out of reach. Dubai became his layer of protection, not because no one knew where he was, but because of geographic distance and legal complexity. However, that safe distance officially came to an end in April 2026. Within just 48 hours of receiving the judicial file, UAE authorities quickly located and arrested him, marking a major turning point in extradition cooperation between Ireland and the UAE. So who was this man? Why did he become one of the most heavily pursued names in Europe's criminal underworld? And why did it take nearly a decade after the accusations, sanctions, reward money, and a series of international investigations for authorities to finally arrest him? Daniel Joseph Kinahan was born in 1977 in Dublin, Ireland. To the public and the international media, this name was tied to the bright lights of elite boxing arenas, a familiar face standing beside world champions in million-dollar frames. However, behind that glamorous cover was a much darker reality, where Daniel was not just a sports fan, but one of the key figures of the Kinahan Organized Crime Group, a transnational criminal organization with roots in Ireland. Daniel's rise did not begin from nothing. It was built on the foundation laid by his father, Christopher Christie Kinahan Sr. In the Irish underworld, Christie Sr. was seen as the man who laid the groundwork for the Kinahan network, moving the family from local criminal activities toward a cross-border network. The family's influence later expanded beyond Ireland, especially into Spain and the Costa del Sol region, a place many European gangs once used to meet, make deals, launder money, and coordinate illegal activities from a distance. Taking over his father's legacy, Daniel Kinahan brought this system into a new, more professional, and more sophisticated phase. According to international law enforcement agencies, the Kinahan criminal organization now operates like a multinational corporation with an estimated value of up to £1.5 billion. Daniel was accused of running the organization's day-to-day operations. His younger brother, Christopher Kinahan Jr., was said to be connected to the network's finances, while Christie Sr. still held a strategic role. This network was accused of controlling about 1/3 of Europe's cocaine market, moving massive amounts of drugs and heroin from South America into the United Kingdom and mainland Europe. To protect the empire and maintain absolute power, the Kinahan Organized Crime Group did not hesitate to use illegal military-grade weapons and carry out shocking assassinations. Back home in Ireland, the High Court directly named Daniel Kinahan as the person who approved or directed acts of violence in the conflict between the Kinahan faction and the Hutch faction. This conflict became a dark stain in European criminal history, It erupted from the killing of Gary Hutch in Marbella, Spain, in 2015, leading to a horrifying chain of retaliation. The peak came with the attack at the Regency Hotel in 2016, where gunmen disguised as police officers tried to assassinate Daniel in the middle of a boxing event. Although Daniel narrowly escaped death, the violence left 18 people dead and pushed the Kinahan family into the sights of law enforcement agencies across Europe. Under pressure from the crackdowns, the Kinahan family chose Dubai as their final refuge. In this luxurious port city, Daniel began a sophisticated strategy to whitewash his reputation through soft power. He moved deeply into professional boxing, using the fighter management company MTK Global as an ideal front to launder dirty money. Daniel's influence was so great that top world fighters such as Tyson Fury once publicly praised him as the man who arranged the biggest fights in history. He was also accused of secretly receiving millions of dollars under the table to serve as an exclusive advisor for major boxing promotion companies. In Dubai, Daniel was not only hiding, he and his family built a real estate investment portfolio worth millions of dollars and registered a series of legitimate businesses to disguise international money laundering activities. By taking advantage of the UAE's complex legal relationships around extradition, Daniel tried to turn luxury into a shield, a fortified stronghold to protect his drug empire from the punishment of justice for many years. Dubai was not simply a hiding place for Daniel Kinahan. It served as a fortress with two solid layers of protection: geography and law. For many years, the distance between Ireland and the United Arab Emirates was not measured only in thousands of flight miles, but also by a vast legal gap. Because there was no bilateral extradition treaty, Ireland could not simply send forces in and bring a suspect home. Every law enforcement effort ran into an invisible barrier. To extradite him, they needed an airtight judicial file and an official cooperation mechanism that, at the time, still did not exist. That legal gap allowed Kinahan to enjoy a royal lifestyle in the heart of Dubai. While intense crackdowns were taking place across Europe, he openly owned collections of supercars and some of the most high-end apartments in the world. Even when the U.S. Department of State offered millions of dollars in reward money or imposed financial sanctions, the reality in Dubai did not immediately change. Those forms of international pressure could not automatically become a local arrest warrant. To break through the UAE's sovereign shield, authorities had to turn the accusations into a legal file strong enough to stand before a completely different court system. But the biggest challenge lay in the very nature of organized crime. As the alleged leader, Kinahan operated more like an architect than a direct foot soldier. He rarely appeared at the scene or left clear physical traces. His role was at the top level, coordinating the network, controlling the flow of money, and giving orders through sophisticated communication channels. So the investigator's task was not only to prove that a crime had happened. The far harder task was proving the invisible but absolute link between the brain running the operation and the entire criminal system beneath him. Because of that complexity, Daniel Kinahan was able to hide in plain sight. He did not need to live like a fugitive being hunted in the darkness. On the contrary, he built public and legal-facing identities for himself, turning luxury into the perfect disguise to challenge justice from afar. For many years, Daniel Kinahan operated his empire under the cover of a Dubai that lacked strict legal frameworks with the West. There, he maintained his criminal activities like a normal business operation, beyond the reach of international judicial institutions. However, that false image began to fade in April 2022, when the United States launched a direct financial strike against Daniel, his family, and the entire Kinahan criminal organization. Any assets or financial interests they had in the United States, or under the control of American citizens and United States-based entities, were immediately frozen. More seriously, Any individual or organization that engaged in transactions with them faced a prison sentence of up to 20 years. This strike was not simply a capital freeze. It was also a campaign of total isolation designed to cut off every economic lifeline of the organization. Along with it, the U.S. Department of State offered a $5 million reward for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of key members of this family. The chain reaction happened almost immediately, just days after the U.S. sanctions. On April 21, 2022, UAE authorities ordered the freezing of all personal and business bank accounts belonging to the Kinahan family and their associates. Although the fighter management company MTK Global was not directly listed under the sanctions, the overwhelming legal pressure caused partners and broadcasters to turn their backs all at once to protect themselves, forcing the company to cease operations soon after. The most powerful figures in boxing also received a stern warning that any connection with Kinahan meant involvement in blood and drugs. The sanctions turned Daniel Kinahan into a financial outcast, completely paralyzing his ability to move illicit money and creating a firm foundation for the historic arrest in 2026. This collapse was also driven by a steady diplomatic process. After years of building trust, Ireland and the UAE officially signed a bilateral extradition treaty in 2024. 1 year later, that treaty was successfully tested with the case of Sean McGovern, a close associate of Kinahan who was extradited to Ireland to face multiple charges. McGovern's capture was not only a procedural victory, it also opened up a valuable trove of evidence. For years, investigators had persistently collected everything from financial records and recorded phone calls to forensic evidence connected to the bloody attack at the Regency Hotel. By early 2026, when the final pieces of the judicial file were complete, justice officially called Daniel Kinahan's name. The urgency of arresting Daniel was pushed forward when Bellingcat and the Sunday Times published images of him enjoying an MMA fight, highlighting Dubai's reputation as a playground for criminals. On April 15, 2026, the arrest warrant for Daniel Kinahan was carried out, marking a highly symbolic turning point. The event was a strong statement from Dubai in its effort to remove the label of criminal haven and strengthen its credibility within the international law enforcement community. As a global financial center closely dependent on the American banking system, the UAE understood that continuing to shield the Kinahan family would cause immeasurable damage to its reputation and economy. In the end, the collapse of this empire may also have come from cracks within. Investigators believe that after McGovern's extradition, the shadow of betrayal and cooperation with authorities began to creep in, pushing Daniel Kinahan into an irreversible dead end. For the families of the 18 victims who fell in the brutal war between the Kinahan and Hutch gangs, Daniel Kinahan's arrest in Dubai was a historic milestone. However, the journey from an arrest warrant to a criminal conviction is still a long road ahead. As of May 2026, Daniel Kinahan has not been convicted of any charge and is still being held in the United Arab Emirates. The judicial file from Ireland has been submitted, reviewed, and is being processed in the higher courts of the UAE. So far, no specific trial timeline has been set. In Dublin, Irish authorities have remained silent, following standard practice for ongoing investigations. No official charges have been publicly announced, and every core detail of the file remains strictly confidential to protect the integrity of the upcoming legal process. Many questions have been raised about why Close Lieutenant Sean McGovern was extradited to Ireland in May 2025. Experts explain that this came from major differences in the legal basis and the timing of the arrest warrants between the two men. McGovern's case was less complex, making him a perfect test case for diplomatic cooperation through a special arrangement. By contrast, Daniel Kinahan, as the man at the top level, was arrested only after a massive legal file had been fully completed, and he is now facing an official extradition process that is many times more complex. Legal experts estimate that this extradition battle could last from 9 to 12 months if Kinahan decides to appeal. Under the UAE legal system, he has the right to challenge the extradition order through at least 2 levels of appeal. Kinahan's lawyers will almost certainly exploit narrow legal loopholes, such as arguments related to human rights or political motivation, to delay the process. Even in the most favorable scenario, if Kinahan accepts extradition and gives up his right to appeal, administrative procedures and strict security considerations would still stretch the process for several more months. Once the extradition order is officially approved, the handover and escorting of Kinahan back to Ireland is expected to take place within 2 weeks. It would be a highest-level security operation, expected to involve coordination with aircraft from the Irish Air Corps. Even so, bringing Daniel Kinahan before the court will not be the end of the fight against this criminal organization. The 2 remaining top figures of the family, his father Christy Kinahan Sr. and his younger brother Christopher Kinahan Jr., are still in hiding. Their last public trace was recorded at an MMA event in June 2025. Since then, every trace of them has completely disappeared from media cameras and investigative reports. Authorities are still keeping information confidential about whether the Kinahan father and son have left Dubai for another country or have gone deeper into underground safe zones. The troubling reality is that even if Daniel Kinahan is extradited, tried, and convicted, as long as Christy Sr. and Christopher Jr. remain free outside the reach of the law, this transnational criminal network will still look for ways to adapt, restructure, and continue operating in the shadows.